It occurred to me as I was going through notes and minutes and comments of people that had watched my channel today, and as has been brewing for the last several weeks, there is an ongoing transformation that has occurred. And my thumbnail says there's a diploma there and you graduated. Well, there is no intent to be condescending about it. We all graduate. It was a comment to each of us about from where we have come and to where we are now. I have watched people on this channel that wrote to me and said, "Why are you telling me this old stuff? I've known it for 30 years. This is all old stuff." And then I have people on the other side of it that say, "Wow, this is amazing. It's so hard to take it all in. It is absolutely overwhelming and I can hardly grasp it." People write even that they haven't been able to sleep for days and that it has been unsettling and it has turned them into a tailspin to learn different things. In truth, we all, and I take even those folks that have been at it for 30 years, we all get new takes on it. And we get new takes on all kinds of pieces. And so let me go through a little bit about this and let me talk about what I see as graduation. I think that the Q phenomenon, if it does nothing but what it has done, it has succeeded. And the reason I say that is that there are, and this is what motivated me to speak about this today, there are 100 or 200 channels that are now talking about Q every time there's a new posting. And there are tens of thousands of you, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, and Q made some estimation that 30 million people are aware of it. It obviously made mainstream news, although in a very condescending way. But the point of the matter is that there are now millions of people throughout YouTube and throughout the internet itself, throughout 8chan and throughout other sources, Reddit and some of the other places, Twitter, that are searching, digging, looking at this, trying to figure out exactly where things are. And whereas everybody sat there, not everybody, but most sat there and said, you know, I don't like what the MSM says, but where else can I go? Well, now we know where else we can go. And what Q has done at a variety of levels is awakened us to all kinds of different layers of what is or was the dark state, the shadow government, the dysfunctional part, and the evil that has been in this country and in this world for generations and for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And so the basic training, I think, when I look at my channel and I look at the people who write to me, more and more and more of you, and at some level it's disconcerting to start with, more and more of you are saying, no, that's not right, or I got a better idea, or I have a different idea. And it brings all kinds of new facets to the way people will look at what Q posted and what others have posted around it and how that shapes up. And there are discussions, you know, for instance today, and this is kind of, on one hand it's a very serious discussion, and on the other hand it's sheer silliness. And that is that that we were worried about who the shooter is and who the parent of the shooter is and what the background of the shooter is and what happened to the people there and whether or not this was Hogg or somebody else, the YouTube shooter, and which parent it was and whether it was a step parent or whether it was a custodial parent. And you know, I have to say to you, once you get to the place where you look at history, at ongoing history, the current aspect of history, the current phase of it, and recognize that in many ways, every one of these shootings has all of these little pieces. Once you get to the place where you say, I'm going to look at this with discernment, with concern, with quizzicalness, with questioning, with skepticism, with disbelief, and then you dig deeper and you say, well, no, this is not what really happened. The shooters weren't doing this. There are witnesses that said something different. There are all kinds of different takes on it. And once you get to that place, you recognize, is it MK Ultra? Is it FBI? Is it CIA? Is it some kind of false flag entirely? Is this a random shooting? There are real shootings. There are real crazy people that do crazy things. And there may be no other explanation for it. But in the process of unfolding that, what some of you who said, well, gee, you got it wrong, what I appreciate about it doesn't matter whether I got it wrong or not. And that is to say, that I do care about whether I make a plausible explanation for what I put on. But it doesn't matter ultimately whether I am precisely right about, or you are, about a given event. The question is, are we discerning what went on, and how does that impact, and what does it tell us about the world we live in? And now we're doing that, and there are millions of us doing it. And we're ripping these things apart. Some of us that said, you know, history, what we see today, the news, is never what we're told it is. Some of us have been saying that for a long time, but others of us are just tearing the pieces apart. And some of you got it when you looked at 9/11. Some of you got it when you looked at Sandy Hook. Some of you watched Ole Damagard and looked at the European stuff, and you started to tear the pieces apart. But the point of the matter is, you're going to see 50 or 100 false flags in this country and that many more in Europe. And the point of the matter is that with this education, we can rip this apart and see what is likely really happening. And we can be skeptical about what we're being told. And that's critical. The MSM is no longer our news god. So that's perfect. We look differently at government and society. You know, this whole brouhaha about SES, where some people came in and said, well, this is it, this is the ultimate, or this plus a few other things. Once we get it, we've narrowed it down. Well, it isn't that, and I don't think it's that. And I think that some of the people who say it, that that's all there is, are deflecting us from what's real. But it is a layer. It's a very real layer, and there are very real people in the government who are sponsored to deflect, disaffect, disturb, uproot, and to maintain dysfunctionality and or criminality and or dark stuff in our government. And being able to recognize how those layers might play out is really important. The same thing goes with the world events. You know, we've been steeped in what's going on in North Korea, what's really going on in North Korea, what's going on in China, who's into China, who's into North Korea, who is telling North Korea what to do, who's the puppet here, and that also is true of Europe. And so the recognition that there are things going on which are not consistent with what we were raised is really important. What I've tried to do in my channel is to show that this has been ongoing for generations and for hundreds of years. And I plucked out pieces like the Poppy Bush thing, if you take a look, and also the Franklin Delano Roosevelt stuff, which I'll do more of, as pieces, and the 9/11 things, to say, all right, get a grip on here, and you can see that the pieces are ongoing. Well, what we get once we get that is a skepticism about Woodrow Wilson or Teddy Roosevelt or Churchill or what Eisenhower did or what Lyndon Johnson did or the Vietnam War. All of those pieces start to take on a whole different look. And whether you and I agree about exactly what happens is not important as I see it, as long as we agree that something happened and that it is incongruous with how we choose to live, how we see a nation operating. So, and the other part about this that has to do with this piece is that we have been exposed to the dark underbelly. Let me use the plus symbol. I got the plus symbol wrong today. I totally blanked it out. That Q talks about a single plus as Soros and two as the Rothschilds, and 3 as Saudi Arabia. I think it's probably the other way around with the top 2. It may very well be that the Vatican is in there. And let me point out to you what I think about this, the Soros business. Certainly Soros is representative of a very dark part, and he is funding things both in Europe, throughout Eastern Europe, Ukraine, the areas from which he came, and also in the United States and probably in Canada and elsewhere. And he's a very dark force, and there are people that believe he's worth the 18 billion. There are people that also believe he might be worth $1 trillion. There are people who believe that the Rothschilds are worth 200 or 400 or 5 or 600 trillion, and I don't think the Saudis are worth that. But these things are all operating in the background, and the Rothschilds, for instance, financed John D. Rockefeller when he got started, and J.P. Morgan when he got started. And while we haven't always known how that split out with the Rockefellers, when Morgan died, I think we thought he was the richest. We, that is the United States, thought he was one of the 2 or 3 richest men in the United States. And it turns out that about 85% of what we thought he owned was owned by the Rothschilds. So how long has that been going on? The Rothschilds financed Rockefeller. How much dipping is there back and forth? And let's take a look at another piece. So we've got a listing here, I think it's Reuters, that lists the so-called richest billionaires in the world, and it points out that there are 1,500 billionaires, and there are 560 in the United States alone. Those people can do a lot of damage, folks. You know, if $800,000 or $10 million finances a congressional campaign, and you have a super PAC, and you can toss that like it's chump change, it makes a difference. And our current election laws don't keep people from doing that. But let's take a look at it from a deeper perspective. So here are the supposedly top 9. Larry Page, the CEO of Google. Well, what have we been hearing about from Q about Google? It's one of the big players, right? And it's one of the big negative players. A mere $52 billion. Then you got Larry Ellison, who's head of Oracle. He's worth $60. You've got Carlos Slim Helú and family. This is Latin America's largest mobile telecom of America Mobile, and he's worth $67. You've got Bernard Arnault, who is the CEO of LVMH. He's only worth $68 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, that everybody thinks of as a goofball. I think he's a goofball. Does he own what he owns? Was he backed? Was he started? Was the idea even come from somebody else? Is he related to the folks that set him up? But it says he's worth $72 billion. Is he wreaking havoc? Of course he is. You've got Amancio, how did I got it wrong? Anyway, Ortega, $76 billion. Wealthiest man in Europe, Warren Buffett's $90 billion. Bill Gates, $91 billion. And Jeff Bezos, one of the other guys on our list, right, who's worth supposedly about $109 billion and made $17 billion last year alone. So which of these players is causing us problems? And I will tell you that I think symbolically Soros may only be one of 100. Does it mean that we should get Soros and forget everybody else? No, it doesn't. They're all big players, and at different times Q's talked about it, but we need to be conscious of that, and that's part of the education, is to take a look at the fact that these giant players are playing games. So if Gates goes into Africa and is supplying vaccines, is that a good thing or a bad thing? How is that working? If Bezos is buying up a newspaper, how does that work? How does that fit into the bigger picture? And you've got people like Elon Musk and others who are not on this list that are also causing huge problems. So let's go to another layer. We talked today about acronyms, and we've been doing this with the Q thing all along. You know, what does Moab mean? Well, does Moab mean mother of all bombs? Does it mean Moab, Utah? Does it relate to Huber? Does it relate to the Moabites that were adjacent to Israel on the highlands and Semitics? Does it matter? See, that's the deal. If it's life or death, whether an acronym of some kind or another, the clowns or whatever is there, does it matter enough to make a difference? The question then is, do you see the big picture? And if somebody says to you, hey, look, that process, you got the thing wrong, or here's another way to look at it, if we are open-minded enough to shift gears and look at other ways that might play out and how it fits into the dialogue, we are learning in an ongoing way, and the education then becomes natural. It becomes a part of who we are and how we fit through it. And the same thing with symbols. Today we talked about symbols, and there are people who said to me, and I'm not picking on them, it's a very good talking point. There are people that said to me, well, look, this means this and that means that, and this comes from Germany and this comes from Scandinavia and this comes from the Babylonians and the rest of that. And I'm going to say to you that there have been symbols for 30 or 40,000 years. How do we know that? Well, I spent a whole bunch of time looking at the Chauvet Cave and others, not as an archaeologist or somebody digging around in the caves, but looking at the symbolism of it. And we as humans have had symbols since the beginning of time. And as we apply those, the people who branch off into different groups take those symbols with them and make something of them. And the symbol itself is not evil or good. The symbol is what it is until it is applied in a certain way, and certain people hold it in a certain way and give energy to it, and then it makes a difference. And so the symbols as we see them among a group in combination are what give us the capacity to discern what that group is about. So the triangle symbol wrapped into itself that has come to be the meaning for pedophilia certainly is. And we saw with the Podesta stuff, hot dogs mean one thing and cheese pizza means another thing, and having parties means something different, and it's all a slang language. And certainly you and I don't necessarily think of cheese pizza in the kind of way that they may think of cheese pizza. So that symbolism, while it is current, has ramifications out from where we are. And so we take those symbols and look at how people apply to them. It's part of our education. The same thing is true with religions. There are people who said, well, gee, you've got the Catholic religion wrong, or this is not right, or the Protestants have picked up pieces of that, and so which ones are evil? The ones that are using the symbols this way or that way? Well, I'm going to say to you that it can all go both ways, and that's not to skate the issue. There are symbols that were pagan symbols picked up by the early Christians or by the Roman Catholics, and in some cases they just simply moved into a temple that had pagan symbols in it. People were used to those symbols. They came into the temple. There might be Isis with a babe that became Mary and Jesus, and they played with all of these symbols in multiple ways to make them fit the pagans that they were converting. And they did that all over Europe and then expanded into, clear into Haiti and Mediterranean and South and North America and even the Aborigines. And they picked up symbols, and those became part of that church. And that's also true with the Protestants. The Protestants picked up Catholicism and they dropped pieces they didn't like, Martin Luther being either the first or one of the first, and said, we don't need 7 sacraments, we only need 2 or whatever. There are Protestant religions that don't use wine, they use grape juice, they don't use wafers, they use bread, and vice versa. We've got baptisms where it's symbolic with a drop of water and people getting totally drenched, and those are all symbols, and if they are innocent symbols, it is of no consequence one way or the other. If, on the other hand, it takes a dark turn, or it was always dark and it stays that way, then we take a look at that symbolism and we take a look at the combinations of that symbolism in a way that makes that tells us more about that group. So we've got politics here, and we've been watching this. We've been watching the players, and Q has been basically staying out of Republicans versus Democrats for the most part. But we've come to know that there are players that are playing both sides of it, like my buddy Jockstrap McStain and others. There was someone who said today, well, when you talk about Hillary Rodham Clinton, are we just talking about Hillary? Why aren't we talking about Bill? Why aren't we talking about Rahm Emanuel or dozens of other people that were involved? Why, when we talk about the Republicans, do we just talk about Jockstrap and the rest of those guys? Well, it doesn't. Those are symbolic of it, and there may be hundreds or thousands like them that are like players. You know, most of us have come to understand and appreciate that probably in Congress there are very few, if any, who are not tainted. That is, tainted by bribery, tainted by blackmail, tainted by corruption and graft, are tainted out of fear. And so are they acting for us? Well, it's highly questionable. And so the discernment that comes with a diploma, if you don't mind me using the terminology, the term that comes with it, this discernment comes with it, is that we start to say, why is that person acting the way he or she does? Why did they do this? And when we look at things like Uranium One and Bill Clinton running around making $500,000 at a pop, getting $17 million honorarium from Laureate University for doing nothing more than being a symbolic director or chamber member, and we see how those things link with the money that comes through the tunnel, through the chamber, and back out to guys like Bill Clinton. And we say, all right, look, that stuff's going on all over the place. We've got guys like Denny Hastert that passed legislation to move a freeway, a main highway, and a federally funded arterial down through a place where he and his buddies had property. So this stuff is going on at all kinds of levels all the time. And of course, in the politics, we also know that there are forces that are driving our government, double agents, people with multiple passports, people who represent different countries than our own, and people who are paying them off. And when we get to the deep end of the deep state, we see that the banker bunch has been doing this since 1913. But wait, they did it in the 1860s. But wait, they did it in the 1780s. But wait, the War of 1812 was yet another one. But wait, assassinations are all being linked to money. It's a funny thing. It wasn't a crazy little lone wolf like Lee Harvey Oswald that did it. It was corruption for money, and it was a big deal. So now we are at a place where what I'm saying is, and I truly believe this, it's time for many of us to get a bigger perspective. The false flag or hoax or weekly gun battle that goes on is just symbolic of what's ongoing. And there are going to be 100 of them a year, and I don't really think it matters whether this guy's grandfather was a member of the Ku Klux Klan or whatever else. I don't think it matters. It really doesn't, because it's going to be ongoing, and it is part of the powers that be. And so once we recognize that that's the case, we have our education in hand. And so what I am going to propose to do for me are two things. One is to continue to draw back into history and to give us an idea, to share with you what I think is my idea of what's been going on and how long it's been going on and how it plays out now. That's the first one. And the second one is, and then this is much more critical to the process, the second one is, where are we today in the big picture? Not who's killing so-and-so in San Antonio or in Chicago, but the big picture. And the big picture is, how do we fix this? Who's fixing it and how do we fix it? And what most of us that have followed Q have said is, God, we hope Trump is a good guy. We hope Q is telling us that he's good. We hope that the military backers and all the rest of that are there are actually doing what they tell us they're doing. And if in fact that's the case, it may very well be that this flips, but it is a monumental project. And the second part about it is we recognize even if they're doing all of this, will they falter? And they will falter if we don't back them. That's my belief. And so how do we benefit them? Well, somewhere around 10 or 20 million of us basically in some fashion or other rise up and say, no, you're not going to do this to us anymore. We're not going to tolerate it. So if Q is telling us that the real guys are doing real things, then we say, well, of course they are, and we back them. We 100% back it. The second part of this, beyond the faltering, and the other side of it is, if these guys are not going forward or they get shut down, then it's going to take the American public to do something more than click. And I have said this before, but let me say it again. We've got to take out all the snakes and we got to take out the dragons. And the snakes have little pluses by them, or they don't have little pluses by them, or they're minions or puppets at a lower level. But they're all out doing what they're supposed to do, and that's how they get rich, that's how they get power, that's how they get position, that's how they get to be in the Senate or the House, or in the administration, or in the SES, or 100 other things. Or they get an overthrown government in their country that's backed by the CIA. So all of that stuff is there. They get more military power, they get F-18s, whatever it is. And then we have to go for the dragons, which are behind it all, and they are the ones that are paying for all of this horrible, awful, heinous corruption. And we have to get right to the core of it. We have to go after the dragons, and if we falter, it'll all close back in on us. If you clean 2/3 of the swamp out and you don't drain it and you don't put a ditch all the way out to the river or the ocean, it will fill right back up. And it will fill with life too, wildlife of whatever fashion, and none of it will be good. So we basically need to see it crusted and dried and absolutely cleared before we can go on. And that means dumping everything clear to the top, and it means we may have rough times. So what I would say to us, and I say this across YouTube, and I say this to tens of thousands of people that I have seen passing through my channel and through millions of others all over, happy graduation. Because we have dramatically changed the way people, many thousands and perhaps millions of people look at our world. And that is a huge step. So my thanks to Q, whoever Q is, my thanks. My thanks to all of the other channels that have been chiming in on this along with my little channel. And my thanks to the people that were here before that had huge pieces for us to pick up, to sneak in on across all of these spectra. Political, religious, military, the acronyms, the symbols, the ancient history, the politics, the interactions, the fraud, the blackmailing, and the rest of that. Thanks to all of them, because they have done incredible efforts. My most recent one had to do with a guy named Stinnett, who spent a dozen years ferreting out what happened in Pearl Harbor. There are so few like them, and they make so much difference to us in this world. And I bow to them in thanks, because without them we would not see these pictures. So my thanks to all. My congratulations on your graduation. We'll have a little ceremony after. You have to have mortar boards and the rest of that, and we'll have some beverages before the dance begins this evening. If you like it, subscribe it, give it a thumbs up if you see fit. But I really truly believe that this has been a lovely education. And now, we got to put on the uniforms and march. So, but keep educating. Thanks so much.